guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we are doing my August wrap up. I am determined to get my wrap up on time this month. It is currently September 1st when I'm filming this. I read 16 books. No, I read more than that. 18 books. I read 18 books and then I had 2 DNFs. So if you're new to my channel, first of all, hi, love you, thank you. Second of all, if you're new here and you haven't seen my wrap-ups before, I start with the books that I like the least and then I work my way up to the books that I like the most. So I'm gonna be talking about my DNFs first. I also had 2 books that I did not rate, but I'm gonna talk about them later in the video because I actually did really enjoy both of them and I recommend them. So if you're like skimming through, I don't want you to miss those 2. And also, I had 7 novellas that I read for a vlog. So those 7 novellas I am not going to be talking about. I'm just going to mention them, give you my rating, and keep it moving because I don't want to sit here and talk about like the same books over and over and over. So I will leave that vlog linked up above and down below so you can go check it out. If you want to hear any like in-depth thoughts or like plot summaries or anything from those 7 horror novellas, and it is a spoiler-free vlog. Let's just go ahead and get started. I just got off of work. It's Thursday evening. I'm trying to make this quick. So I DNF'd 2 books this month. One of them, I feel like a lot of people are going to be offended by. So the first book, I don't think anyone's going to be offended by, but the first book that I DNF'd is the new Josh Malerman book, Daphne. This comes out in September, I think like September 20th? Something like that. I could be wrong. But yeah, I had an ARC copy of this book on NetGalley, and unfortunately it was a miss for me. So this Daphne woman is a ghost. It's like an urban legend story about this woman Daphne where if you like mention her, she kills a bunch of people, and it's like a slasher, like people are being picked off. But I DNF'd this 45% of the way through because this was literally a YA horror about basketball playing teens with anxiety. Like literally nothing was going on other than reading about teenagers playing basketball and having anxiety. Like that was this entire book. And then they bring in this detective point of view, which is like completely useless. And I'm like, okay, when are we gonna start getting into like the murders, you know? I don't know. I don't know how I feel. I'm not like a huge paranormal girl. Like they usually don't work for me. And this one, this is the first time I'm filming with my cat in the room and she's crazy. But yeah, it just did not work for me. It read very, very YA, and there's nothing I hate more than like when I'm expecting an adult horror book and it's giving me YA feelings. Like if it's labeled as YA, sure, but this one was just, I don't understand. Next DNF is the one that everyone is going to be offended by. I feel like I'm currently channeling my inner Zach Rance from Big Brother. If you know, you know Zach Rance from season 16. I feel like that is me in my wrap-ups, like just how abrasive he is. I feel like I channel that before discussing books. But this is a book that is very loved in the horror community, that everyone has given 5 stars, that everyone raves about, and I absolutely fucking hate this book. I DNF'd it about 50 pages in, and I really don't give a shit. It's House of Leaves. Fuck this book. Okay. I think I finally found a book that I hate more than Dead Inside by Chandler Morrison, and that's this book. Everyone's like, oh, this is a 5-star, fantastic, amazing read, like, it's great, it reads like a textbook, and I'm just like, who likes reading textbooks for fun? Okay, let me tell you a little bit about this book. So we're following this guy, Johnny, and he gets a call from his friend that his elderly neighbor passed away. And Johnny goes over and they go into his apartment after he dies, and they find this manuscript that he was writing based off of a documentary about this family, the Navidston family. I don't fucking know. But he's writing this manuscript based off of a documentary about this family that moves into this house, and the house is larger on the inside than it is on the outside. It's like this labyrinth, weird like hallways popping up out of nowhere. And he reads this manuscript and he becomes like obsessed with the story, and he starts like slowly going insane. So that's what this book is about. So you're literally you're reading the manuscript called the Navidston Record, and it's like based off of a documentary, but then it says that there's no records of the documentary existing. So I don't know what we're reading, because everyone says the Navidston Record is so interesting and like creepy and unsettling and amazing, and I thought it was so boring to the point where I like couldn't comprehend what I was reading because I was so bored. Like it felt like you're reading a textbook. There's like all these little footnotes where he's like referencing like interviews and like documentaries and like all these like references, but apparently it doesn't exist. I am just so confused, okay? And then you're reading this stupid manuscript, and literally in the middle of a sentence, it will just cut out, and it's just Johnny going on this rambling mess about how, you know, he's out drinking and doing drugs and having sex with all these women, and he goes on these like rampages and rants for like pages and pages and pages, and you're like, Johnny, shut the fuck up, okay? Listen, this book, everyone's like, give it a shot, give it a shot. I gave it a shot by reading 50 pages, and I want nothing to do with this book. Like, that's how angry this made me. Like, I am angry that I bought this. I am angry that I read 50 pages of it, and it's 736 pages, I'm pretty sure. I would rather read a 736 page IKEA manual than read this book, okay? Look at this. Look at it. It's just like the weirdest text. Like I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this information, and everyone's like, you have to just give it a shot. I'm like, give it a shot, like. And then listen, you guys know I love you guys, I listen to you, I trust you, but some of y'all messaged me and were like, oh yeah, you would love this book, it's a 5-star read, it reads like a textbook. And I'm like, excuse me, it reads like a textbook? I want nothing to do with that. I got an associate's degree and I never studied a day in my life, okay? Look at this. What am I supposed to do with this information? I'm over it. Now that I got that off my chest, you Fruit Loop dingus, I am going to get into the other books that I read this month, which were much better than those two. So I will start with, what is the book that I liked the least that I actually read this month? Let me see, I have a list on my phone. My 2-star read was We Can Never Leave This Place by Eric LaRocca, which is in that novella vlog, which I'll leave linked. It was just not my thing. It's like horror mixed with fantasy, mixed with folklore. No thank you. Then my 2.5-star reads, first being Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Cesar, which was a gift from one of you guys, from my friend here on YouTube, Danielle, from Danielle's Books, and then also her husband, Zach, from Zach's Books. I'll leave their channels linked down below. Love them. They're great. Go subscribe. Thank you so much. I've really been looking forward to reading this because I feel like I'm the only one that hasn't read it until now. I did go with a 2.5. So this is a YA slasher where basically this clown is like picking people off one by one in this town. And I feel like this book would have been better as a novella. because I feel like, you know, it wasn't terrible, but it just wasn't great, because the first like 150 pages, it's literally about nothing, and it's not even like strong character development or anything. It's just like no like plot, purpose, anything. It's just like nothing. And I don't mind if there's like, you know, character development in there, but it was like all these teenagers' names just kind of thrown in there, and like halfway through the book, more than halfway, it was like the end of the book, and I'm like, who the hell is Ronnie? Like, I don't even know who that is. So, I mean, it just lost me. And then, you know, like halfway through the book, we start getting into the slasher, which that was fun. You know, it was like a fun time, enjoyable. It's like, you know, typical YA slasher. I'm like, I'm not expecting anything crazy. I was more leaning towards like a 3-star, 3.5 maybe. And then the end happened. Can we talk about this ending? This book got super political, and like political in a sense where it was very much like Democrat versus Republican, and like the slogans, and it was written, you know, before the election in 2020, and it was just annoying. Like, I find left versus right things to just be annoying, because I'm not like a political person. I don't want to talk about politics and watch the news for fun. Like, that's just not my thing. So I just found it to be annoying. And then also, this is not a spoiler. Like, this does not take away from the book at all. But at the very end, it's like all of a sudden homosexuality was being used as a plot twist. And I get he was probably trying to put like representation in there, but I just found it to be like that's just not the way that you do something. And I was just turned off by like the whole ending of this book. So not great, not terrible, just eh. And I probably will not be reading the second book. So next 2.5-star read was sadly The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. This is a sequel to The Family Remains. No, this is The Family Remains. This is the sequel to The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. And unfortunately, this one just didn't totally work for me. I didn't dislike it. I didn't like it. It was just, unfortunately, even though this can be read as a standalone, like everyone is saying, I feel the opposite. I feel like you really need to have a strong hold on the first book to really know who these characters are, because they do summarize it in the beginning, like this is so-and-so, this is so-and-so, but I just felt confused reading this, because I felt like I couldn't remember who the characters were, because there wasn't strong character development, because most of that came from the first book. So I was getting so confused, I was getting people mixed up, and there's a lot of little like side stories in here that just kind of didn't need to be in here. Like, I just felt like this book didn't need to be a book. Like, I don't think we needed a second book to the first one. I feel like she could have just left it alone, left it be. Like, I kind of just felt like this was a little bit pointless. I know I have the unpopular opinion that everyone else seems to be loving this, but I don't get the hype. Then, sadly, my next 2.5-star read, which kills me, this is my least favorite Grady Hendrix book, and it's Bad Astronauts. This is a sci-fi novella. It's not horror. It's literally Redneck Nassau. I can never say Nassau properly. There we go. That's what it's described as in the book. Basically, this guy's cousin is an astronaut, and he gets stuck in a space station, an international space station, and NASA's like, oh, well, we're out of money, we're out of funds, like, let's just leave him up there to die. And he's just like, hell no, I'm gonna go rescue my cousin. So him and all these like people in the neighborhood start just like building a rocket ship in the backyard to go rescue his cousin. That's what this book is about. To me, I mean, I don't really read sci-fi, so I didn't really care, and it was a little bit boring, if I'm being honest. Like, really not a lot happens in this book. I didn't really understand what the point was, but you know, the writing's great, it's Grady Hendrix, but it just wasn't my thing. If this would have read more horror, that would have been my thing, but I'm glad I read it, but sadly, my least favorite Grady Hendrix. Next, I have some 3 stars, the first one being Cirque Berserk, which I read for that vlog, and I gave it 3 stars. It was like a YA slasher. And then my next 3 star was Fantastic Land by Mike Bachman. This was a gift from one of you guys, from Linda. Thank you so much. I'm so glad I finally read this, and I also listened to the audiobook while reading this, and the audiobook, let me tell you, 5 out of 5. Absolutely fantastic audiobook. It's a full cast. Actually, it's 2 people with like different voices, and it sounds like a full cast. It's fantastic. But this is a story where this hurricane hits, and basically a bunch of people that work in this amusement park and people in the park were stranded in this amusement park, and they were like, okay, you have to stay in our shelter, and I think they had to stay there for like 6 weeks or something like that. And basically people start killing one another. Like, they break off into groups. It's like a battle royale. People are killing one another, and then people are posting it on social media, so they're trying to investigate what happened. So each chapter is like a different interview with someone, so someone's like telling you a story about what happened. But the thing for me was that it didn't make sense. The motive did not make sense. He literally says in the intro that they had plenty of like food, water, and shelter to survive. So I'm like, you're stranded for like 2 days and suddenly you all become serial killers? Like, it did not make sense at all. And that's the issue that a lot of people have with this book, is that it does not make sense. If he would have just said, oh, there was only enough like food and water to last like 3 days or something, and people had to kill each other to survive, like, that would have made sense. I would have loved it. I would have given it at least 4 stars. But I just, the entire time reading this, like, it was well done. I did enjoy the interviews. I did enjoy the overall premise, but the whole time I just could not stop thinking about how this did not make sense. So I could not give it more than 3 stars. And then my next 3-star read was my first Ronald Malfi book, which everyone seems to be obsessed with this book. And it is Come With Me. So this book is about this man who, his wife passes away, and he discovers this receipt from his wife that she like stayed in this hotel for a few days, and he thought that she cheated on him. So he started kind of like investigating, looking into this to find out if his wife was cheating on him, and instead he comes across all these other hidden things that his wife had that points in the direction to the fact that she may be searching for a serial killer. So you're just following this man trying to like unravel these secrets, and it was interesting. I liked it. It was well done. This is labeled as horror, which it was not. It was very much a mystery, like a straightforward mystery book. That is what this is. So for me, I'm not a huge like mystery person, so I did find it a little bit slow to get through at times and a little bit boring. I know everyone seems to really love this book, and I tend to have unpopular opinions, but I did like it for what it is. I gave it 3 stars. I think if you're looking for just like a good mystery, you would like this one. But if you're into like thrillers and horror, I don't know how you're gonna feel about this. It seems like everyone has such different opinions on this one, but yeah. Next, moving on to my 4-star reads. Most of the novellas that I read for my vlog were 4 stars. So we have Against the Lockers by Aidan Mezer. This one's more of a short story, but this one is extreme horror. And then I had Chainsaw Hooker by Judith Sonnet. I also gave that one 4 stars. This one is just like a real weird, crazy extreme horror, And then Womb by Duncan Ralston, another extreme horror that I read and gave 4 stars. I love my extreme horror, what can I say? Finally, Scanlines by Todd Kiesling, another 4-star horror. That's in my vlog. And moving on to a thriller 4-star read, we have Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney, the new Alice Feeney release that I was so highly anticipating because she's one of my all-time favorite authors. I'm obsessed with her. So in this one, it is like an Agatha Christie and then there were none retelling, which I'm not a fan of Agatha Christie retellings. I really wish that authors would stop. Like, how many fucking Agatha Christie retellings do we need? Like, seriously, stop. But anyways, this one, we are following this girl, Daisy Darker, and she basically goes to her grandmother's. Her grandmother has this like house on an island, and her family goes to her house for her 80th birthday because she was told by like a psychic that she was gonna die on her 80th birthday. I think it was her 80th birthday, yeah. So her and her family all get together. They haven't spoken in a long time. There's a lot of family drama going on and people start being picked off one by one. So I kind of struggled with my rating on this one because it is not my favorite Alice Feeney. It's kind of like my least favorite, honestly. This one and what the hell's that other one? I Know Who You Are. They're my least favorite Alice Feeney's. I still have to read his and hers. But yeah, the writing was a little bizarre. Like, it didn't feel like Alice Feeney's classic, like, great thriller writing. It was weird. Like, each chapter had like a weird saying at the end or like a weird phrase where it's like, but we all have secrets, or every family has secrets. It was like every chapter ended like weird and it was like a little bit slow. I don't know. There's 3 major twists in this one. I guessed the one. Like the first one, I was like, easy, saw it coming. The other ones, I should have seen the one major twist coming. A lot of people could guess what it is. There's a lot of hidden Easter eggs. And when it was revealed, I'm not the biggest fan of this type of twist, so it kind of just turned me off a little bit. I mean, I do think it was well done. I did enjoy it. It was a fun time. It's just not my favorite Alice Feeney or my favorite thriller, but I ended up giving it 4 stars. Then my next 4-star read, actually, this might even be like a 4.5 because I found it so enjoyable. And that is Suburban Hell by Maureen Kilmer. This is a new release from August. I had the ARC copy on NetGalley and I read it and I bought the physical copy. First of all, look at it, it's stunning. Second of all, this book is so fun, I love it. It is a horror comedy about these suburban moms in this rich suburban neighborhood, and suddenly one day the one friend is like different. Like, she's acting weird, she might be possessed. It slightly reminds me of My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. Kind of reminds me of that. Obviously not as great, not as iconic, not as like flawless as that book, but a similar vibe. Very much like comedy. I can see why some people said that this was boring to them because you're literally reading about these like rich suburban moms going to like PTA meetings and like parties and you are reading a lot about like their life and their families and things like that. But then there's just like this weird horror aspect to it with this like demon possession situation, and it is just so much fun. I loved it. I had a fun time. If you're looking for just like an easy, fun read, like this would be so fun to read in October. If you're new to reading horror, you might love this. It's nothing like super graphic or anything. It was just such a fun read and I absolutely loved it. Next, I want to quickly talk about these 2 books. I did not rate them because I just feel weird rating these books. One is nonfiction and one is a fictional like book based off of real life. So the first book, it was in my vlog, and it's 3 Days in the Pink Tower by F. Knight. This one is a fiction book, but it's based off of the author's real life when she was held at gunpoint and abducted and raped when she was a teenager. And she basically wrote this book about the same thing, and she said a lot of like the quotes used in here she said in real life. Like, apparently it's very, very heavily based off of real life. So I did not rate this because it just felt weird putting a rating on it, but I do highly recommend if you want to hear more about this book. It's in the vlog. I don't know how many times I can repeat myself, but I highly recommend. So the next book is nonfiction, and it's I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. Now, I was dying to get my hands on this book. It was sold out everywhere the first day that it came out. Yeah, I don't really know much about Jeanette McCurdy and her life, but I heard that this book came out and everyone was just absolutely raving about it, and I ordered it and I finally got my hands on it, and I listened to the audiobook on SCRIBD before this was delivered, and I wanted a physical copy. This book is about Jeanette McCurdy's life and her abusive relationship with her mother. Her mother basically, you know, forced her into having an eating disorder, and she talks a lot about like mental illness, struggling with OCD, and then the creepy producer that was like grooming children, and this poor girl had such a traumatic life and childhood, and it really just dives deep into these like serious topics of eating disorders and, you know, family relationships, how sometimes like the way that you're treated when you're younger is abusive and you don't even realize that it's abusive, and then it plays into your adulthood, and the relationships that some young girls have with their moms, and just the abuse that happens. But she didn't realize that it was abuse at the time until she started like talking to a therapist as an adult, and it's just, it was so well done. I listened to the audiobook on SCRIBD because I didn't know, I ordered this and I had no idea when it was gonna come. And so I listened to the audiobook, and it's narrated by Jeanette herself, which made it so much better. I love when audiobooks are narrated by the author. So highly recommend the audiobook as well. But this was just so well done, so beautifully done. She's just so, I mean, God bless her for being so open and so honest about her trauma. And I hate the way that the media is like spinning this to be like some like diss book about Ariana Grande. Like, bitch, Ariana Grande is mentioned like once in this book. It's about her trauma and her abuse. Like, don't spin it into something that it's not, you know? But I highly recommend. It was a really fantastic read, and I have so much respect. My next 4-star read, I actually own the book, but I don't know where it is. I think it's in the living room, but it is Black Mouth by Ronald Malfi. This was the other Ronald Malfi that I read this month. So this one I liked more than Come With Me because this is more horror. So we are following, this is supposed to be like Ronald Malfi's version of It, which apparently he wrote another book that's very similar to It. So I don't know, but this one is similar to It by Stephen King, and in a sense where we're following these 4 adults, and when they were children, something really traumatic happened to them with this magic man that was basically this like random man who lived in the woods, and some traumatic things happened in their childhood having to do with said magic man. Okay, we are following them mostly from the perspective of them being adults, and we have a few flashback scenes to when they were children and of course what happened. So you are slowly uncovering like who this magic man is as the book goes on. It's really not all revealed until the very end, but you are following them now in adulthood as they are now brought back together to discover some more sinister things that have been going on, and they think it is linked to their past and what happened with the magic man. So we're mostly following them kind of just uncovering things in present day. and then a few flashback scenes, like I said. So I found this one super intriguing. I was definitely into this one more than Come With Me because it just has that, you know, creepy like horror undertone of like what the hell's happening. I will say sometimes like the thing that kind of confused me a little bit is the way that he kind of jumps from like past and present and like without warning. So it's like one chapter you're reading past and then one chapter you're reading present, but you have to kind of figure it out while you're reading. And sometimes like he'll switch POVs and you have to kind of figure it out while you're reading, and it makes it a little bit convoluted at times, like a little bit confusing. I would much prefer like a title or a date or something. I don't know. I also have really bad ADHD and like slight reading comprehension issues from that. So take that with a grain of salt, but I highly recommend this one. Another good like 2022 release. I feel like these new 2022 releases, the good ones, are all coming out the second half of the year. But yeah, highly recommend this one. Okay, now my 2 5-star reads. I had 2 5-star books this month. The first one being my girl, Karen Slaughter. She came out with a new thriller in August and I read it and I absolutely loved this. So this is a follow-up to Pieces of Her. It's a sequel from that book, but it reads like a standalone. So you don't have to read Pieces of Her. If you want to, read that one first because this does spoil it in the beginning. Like it briefly explains what happened in that book. So if you want to read that one, go ahead. I didn't particularly enjoy that book, so I mean, if you're similar to me and you don't care to read that one, definitely read this one. We are following Laura from the first book, her daughter Andrea. We are following her daughter Andrea, and she is now a U.S. Marshal, and she gets put on this case to basically protect this judge that is receiving death threats. So she goes to handle this case, and then we find out the judge's daughter was murdered as a teenager. So we are getting chapters from the past from the judge's daughter who was murdered, and we're trying to figure out who murdered her, and then in present day we're trying to figure out like what is going on with this like judge receiving these death threats. Is it linked to the situation with her daughter? And she gets caught up in this investigation, in this murder investigation, and trying to find out what happened. So well done. In typical Karen Slaughter fashion, we are just diving so deep into these characters and the character development and the story, and everything just links up flawlessly. Flawless, beautiful writing. I feel like every time I read one of her books, it's like watching a like crime show or something. I feel like I'm watching like a really great episode of like Law and Order or something. I don't know. It's just so well done. The research that she must do to like put all this legal jargon and what am I trying to say? Law related things. I don't know. I don't know how she does it. Her books are fucking flawless. I absolutely loved this one. Definitely check it out. I highly recommend. And then my other 5-star read was a buddy read that I did with McKay, and it is American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. I finally read American Psycho, and I could not be happier. So this one also, there's an audiobook for this on YouTube. So check it out. It's free. I listened to it while I was reading, and it's really well done. But in this book, if you don't know about American Psycho, it is a film, and the film is based off of this book. And we are literally following a psychopath. Basically, you know, we're following this guy, Patrick Bateman. He's, you know, intelligent. He's, you know, well put together. He's, you know, good looking, and everyone just loves him. He's super rich and just well loved. We are just getting inside of his head as he slowly descends into madness. So I know a lot of people don't like this book because they say it's boring, and yeah, it does like drag. Like really nothing is going on until the last maybe 40% of the book. something like that. But to me, I thought it was hilarious. It's full of so much satire and just like witty commentary, and you're like literally reading from the point of view of a psychopath. So he says the most fucked up, horrific things, like trigger warnings for a lot of like slurs, animal cruelty, violence, gore. Like, he's a very terrible, terrible human being, and we're reading from his perspective, and you're just like, oh my god, does he seriously think like this the whole time? Like, he's waving money in front of homeless people. He's, you know, just doing terrible, terrible things. But yet, like, some of the things that he thinks, I'm like, oh my god, that's hilarious. Like, he's just crazy. And you're like slowly following his descent into madness. Just is in this huge downward spiral where he just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse and starts murdering people, and OMG, this book is wild. I feel like I am now a fashion expert. He describes fashion so often in this book because he's so vain and like full of himself, and he's like, ugh, I can't believe he's wearing that Ralph Lauren tweed vest with those Gucci black slacks. And like, he describes everyone's outfit in detail to the point where I'm like, sometimes I was like, okay, he needs to stop. Like, this is a little bit much, because every single person he meets or looks at, he describes the outfit from head to toe. And I was like, am I now in fashion school? I think so. But yeah, I highly recommend. I thought this was so entertaining, so off the walls, so well written. It's a masterpiece. All right, so that is my wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what your favorite book that you read this month was in the comments down below, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!